It was the height of the alien abduction phenomenon in the 1990s, and I was there, right on the front lines. I was with Yvonne Smith, Whitley Strieber, and Roger Lear. I formed lifelong friendships with these people and worked with them very closely. I appeared on numerous television programs, from Sightings to the History Channel and more. My work was on the cover of books and magazines and other forms of media. It was everywhere. It even appeared on X-Files. Why? Because I sculpted and did artwork of these little guys known today as the Greys. I was everywhere, and so was my films and art, and it got me in trouble. I'm an artist and a filmmaker, and for much of my life I've made visual effects for movies and television productions. I've worked on Star Trek, and I knew Gene Roddenberry. He was a friend, and I worked with him. My first job ever was to make pointed ears for Mr. Spock. But I've also had abduction experiences, many of them, and they've been ongoing all my life. During the 90s, the experiences were prolific. They sometimes happened every night, certainly weekly. And I was attending Yvonne Smith's support group meetings and going under hypnosis with her to reveal more details about the things I mostly remembered consciously. But it all began here. Not many of you will admit this, because just when you think things are just too weird to talk about, they get weirder. I remember how I came to Earth. They have been there all along, watching me and guiding me as any family would. I remember thinking in my first day of school, this isn't real. I don't belong here. This is a mistake, and I'm not one of these beings. I was frightened and felt vulnerable. Every chance I got, I went into the backyard to look at the stars. I called them home, and I longed to travel to them. And at age 72, I still do. When I was 6, I woke up to a vacuum of silence. For years after that experience, I remained silent. It never left my mind, not till this day. I can recall it like it happened only last night. Things like that just stick with you. I didn't share my secret with anyone. Not family, not friends, not a soul. The encounters and strange events kept occurring all through my childhood. I became a very private and cautious little child. Some of you have probably seen my movie, but something is there. If you haven't, it's on the channel and you can watch it there. I recommend you do watch it because it's about my personal experiences in a movie. It's not a documentary. What I'm about to share with you now, I never shared in the book by the same name, but something is there, or the film. And I'm about to in this episode. This will be a real shocker, despite my going public in the 90s and having my face plastered all over the media. I didn't always share everything that happened with me. Some things were simply too crazy. As crazy as the subject is, there were things I felt went too far. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. So I'm going to tell you about some of them now. Growing up in San Francisco on 47th Avenue, locally was my grammar school, Lafayette. I would go and walk there every day and go to school. It was close by. But I distinctly recall being picked up at night. Two men would come to the front door late at night and somehow get me out of the house. They either did this without my parents knowing, or maybe my parents did know. I'll never be sure about that. But they'd take me to a black sedan, of course, and they would drive me to the school. And when I got there, the school was dimly lit. You could just see the flicker of light coming from inside some of the windows, and there'd be a number of cars parked in front. And children, like me, were being led into the school late at night. Once inside, we were all lined up in a hallway. It was dark in there. There were tall men in hats and doctors walking all around. One by one, we were led into a room in the school to be examined by doctors. At one point, I remember a needle being put in my arm, and it burned very badly. We were then taken to classrooms that had some sort of projector in it, and they were projecting images of the visitors and grays on the screen. And the doctors were studying us to see what our reaction would be. Some of the children screamed. They were in terror. But other ones, like me, watched intently. We weren't afraid. And they took us aside. They told me I was special. And they asked me lots of questions about the visitors. They wanted to know what they wanted. I told them simply we were friends. And all they wanted to do was play with us. I wouldn't tell them anything because I didn't trust them. And I had more fear of my fellow man, of human beings like the ones that took us into that school, than I ever did of the visitors. For years afterwards, I stayed involved in the phenomenon, in the study of this subject. The encounters continued. They became quite prolific, as I said before. They were happening all the time. But my wife, my late wife Jilly, she was very uncomfortable with the whole thing. She didn't feel that I was sane. She was told by many people that I was having a midlife crisis and your husband needs help. That is until she started to see things too. And when she actually saw proof that these things were actually occurring, it scared her to death. She wanted me out. She threatened to leave me if I didn't quit the community. In 2013, my late wife Jillian passed from cancer. This changed my world. And shortly after that, I met Mary, and I moved to Ventura, California, a town by the ocean. We opened up a studio we call SNG Studio. That was over 10 years ago, and we're still here today. We did our art, our making, we built studio scale models, creatures, masks, and a lot more of Hollywood type special effects here for 10 years. In 2017, I decided that I wanted to make a film. I realized we had the equipment, we had the studio, I had my special effects background over the years working with CGI and digital effects and creature effects, practical. I wanted to make a film about my actual experiences, but I also wanted it to be kind of a tone poem. So we started a movie called But Something Is There. I was back, and my old friends, Whitley Strieber and Yvonne Smith, they were in it too. We worked together on this film. Whitley actually speaks at the beginning of the film, but it is actually a drama. And again, you can watch the film, it's on the channel. I kept making projects too. In fact, I even did a couple with Adam Savage where I built the Moonwatcher from 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Star Child, that hybrid baby, and the big space station, which I created with Adam's guidance to be put at a museum in San Francisco, in San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. We did a lot of stuff here like that, but I wanted to keep making film. So we did 2 more films after that, and we kept doing making, but the making was kind of slowing down. We weren't quite getting the gigs anymore. And a lot of that may have to do with ageism, because I'm 72 now, and I was approaching my late 60s, and it just seemed to be dropping off. And more recently, last year in 2023, we watched Amblin Entertainment's Encounters. It was 4 episodes. They were done very well, which is typical of Steven Spielberg, who really cares about this subject matter, and it shows. He basically let people tell their stories. He backed up a lot of their stories with hard evidence, and there were only 4 episodes, and when it ended, it left Mary and I wanting more, as I'm sure it left many of you wanting more. I was sitting at my laptop one day writing on my next script or our next film, and Mary said, "I've got an idea. Why don't we make a show like Encounters, except make it something that's a couple episodes every month, where we allow people who have these experiences to come forward and in a safe setting tell their story without fear of ridicule and skepticism and debunkers." I looked around, I thought about it for a second, and I said, sure, why not? Because again, we have the studio, we have cameras galore, we've got all the lights, we've got everything we need to do it, and there's nothing stopping us. Normally, years ago, you would have to raise a budget for it. And the minute you raise a budget for it, the people who are giving you the money, they want to put their spin on it. And when they put their spin on it, you have the other side of the issue. You have the skeptic, you have the debunker. And this humiliates people. This makes them feel uncomfortable. So where do they stay? In the closet. And many of you have, and many are still doing that, because the people who have these experiences aren't in the thousands, it's in the millions. And we know this because we get letters all the time from people. We get more letters from people who want to remain anonymous than we ever get for people who want to come forward. Why? Because of ridicule. And that ridicule was done deliberately by the media and by the people inside our government. You know it, and I know it. We certainly had our fair share of adversity doing this show. As I was writing the first script, getting ready to shoot, I went to the doctor, I had some discomfort, and it turned out that I had cancer. It took a lot of tests and things, but I had bladder cancer. Not something you want to find out about. But fortunately, it was small. We caught it early. But I still had to go through 2 surgeries, and that meant some real discomfort before and after the surgeries. And it took about 7 months to do 2 surgeries, do recovery. There's still a lot of pain involved, but all during that time, I kept working on this show. And so did Mary, because Mary suffered as much as I did. She had to put up with me. I was hard to deal with, being in that much pain and continuing on working. But in the end, I got clear of the cancer. They caught it early. They got it all. I have to go back from time to time to have it looked at. And things started to settle down. We had just shot Daphne. This was still in 2023 in December. And I'm getting all ready to edit. I'm still in a lot of pain from the surgery and stuff, but I'm so focused on the show that I really, it was a great way to numb it. So I'm getting all excited, I'm getting all ready to start doing the editing. And one night, on December 21st, we woke up at 2 in the morning to find our house flooding with water. That's right, we had a flood. Mary woke at 2 in the morning and she stepped down to go to the bathroom, and her ankles were in water and it was rising. In some areas of the house, it rose as high as 4 feet. When I went into the garage after wading through it in the backyard, I found our car underwater. Just about everything we had in the house was destroyed. Furniture, computers, all the stuff I used to do these shows. But fortunately, the camera equipment, the sound equipment, and the lights were still at the studio. Normally, they were kept under the bed. So, it took me 3 hours hiking through knee to waist-high water to our motorhome, which is the only thing that survived after I got it to higher ground. And I was packing stuff from the house that we would need, and we went to this studio here. And this is where we've been for almost 2 months now while our house gets rebuilt. All during this time, staying here and dealing with a stuffed up, crowded studio we can barely work in because so much of the house stuff is here that we couldn't put in storage. We have been doing these shows. I recently went back to the doctor. They did a cystostomy again, which is a very painful procedure, but it's worth it because they found out only 2 weeks ago the cancer still hasn't come back and everything is fine. That was a huge relief because I had to wait 4 months to get that news, and all during that time I was editing, shooting, and creating visual effects. And this is proof that having something to be focused on, that having a hobby, that having something you're passionate about can get you through anything. It can save your life, and it sure did mine. So I started a GoFundMe, and people were so kind to help because we were not covered by insurance. Our insurance said we were not covered by a flood. Well, we're contesting that, and eventually that'll be turned around in our favor. But in the meantime, we needed to replace equipment, and you came to our aid, and we managed to get back a lot of the equipment we had lost, and that's enabled me to keep on with doing this show, and I'm so grateful to you for that. So here we are today. We're doing this show. So, as we're staying here, things still continue to happen. In fact, they're getting a bit more busy than they've ever been, and I can pretty much tell you why. Because I've come back on the scene, and because I've reconnected with the community, and because we're having support group meetings and working with people and helping people with this experience, it's also attracted more attention from the visitors, in my opinion. And there have been some very interesting nights here, and things keep occurring. Only the other night, I woke up to some strange sounds and an oppressive feeling in the studio. Mary was sound asleep, and I got back into bed, and outside, something came up to the window. It made a strange sound. It was quite large and quite weird and quite strange. And I wanted to get up and look at it, but it wouldn't let me. They said, just go back to sleep. Everything's fine. You don't need to look at me. And I went back to sleep. The next day, I woke up. I was very, very sick. I didn't feel well at all. I felt like I had nausea. I had almost like radiation symptoms. And this went on all day. I could still eat, but I still felt like I had nausea. I felt completely run over. Other than remembering the bright light outside the studio window and the buzzing sound and the feeling that something big was there and going on, I had no other memory. I dream, and when I dream, I always remember my dreams. I always wake up remembering my dreams, and that morning I didn't. I just felt like hell. And after a long day and going to bed that night, I got up the next day and I felt fine. And all during that time, something was talking to me. They were telling me that what they did was to heal me, to make me feel better, not worse, and that I would feel better. And sure enough, I did. I was texting Whitley and telling about how horrible I felt and that night. And we hadn't talked about it before. And he had identically the same night. If you haven't gone out at night and looked at the stars, you should. Never lose your connection with the very thing we were all born from. Connect with your inner child and fill your heart with wonder and joy that we lost when we were told to grow up so long ago, and we stopped looking at the stars.